Hello, my friends. Today we'll start with the fact that the Russians have already begun preparing for autumn strikes on Ukraine's energy facilities. Based on the analysis of Russian reconnaissance drone flight routes outside the frontline zone and eyewitness reports, I can say that they are now targeting energy infrastructure and its protection, substations, transformers, electric and gas facilities. This means everyone also needs to prepare for possible blackouts. But due to the new Russian strikes on Ukraine, the United States plans to consider sanctions against Russia.
Since the phone call when the European leaders and President Zelensky were at the White House the following Monday has done the opposite of following through on what he indicated he wanted to do. As a matter of fact, he has, in a despicable manner, increased the bombing campaign. So I think with President Trump, all options are on the table, and I think we'll be examining those very closely this week.
And Russia has no plans to stop the war. Ushakov said there is no agreement regarding negotiations between the leaders of the countries.
So, the idea of raising the level of the Russian-Ukrainian negotiation delegations, what level are we talking about?
Well, I don't know. This idea came up during a phone call. Then it was touched on during the meeting in Anchorage. Well, the Americans told us they would also think it over among themselves and then come out with some concrete proposals.
So far, there are no concrete proposals.
What is being broadcast in the press is not exactly what we agreed on. Right now, everyone is talking about a trilateral meeting, about a meeting between Putin and Zelensky. But as far as I know, there was no such agreement between Putin and Trump.
Thank you very much.
Overall, the war continues. And today we'll start the frontline overview with a summary of last week. According to foreign analysts, over the past 7 days, Russia has captured 73 square kilometers, and with the gray zone included almost 102 square kilometers. Ukraine, in turn, liberated nearly 18 square kilometers, and with the gray zone, 35. So the fighting remains very intense. Now let's move to the Pokrovsk direction. Yesterday evening, the General Staff announced that the Ukrainian forces had fully liberated Novoekonomichne, a fact we could already see on the map for some time. But this time, the Ukrainian flag was raised there, which is why official statements appeared about its liberation. The defense forces have liberated the settlement of Novoekonomichne in the Donetsk region, the General Staff reported. The operation was carried out by the 425th Separate Assault Battalion, Skela. But there is one problem, and a Ukrainian soldier describes the situation this way. The silence was intentional, so as not to spread too much because the situation is very sensitive. Regarding Novoekonomichne, the fighting is still ongoing. The settlement hasn't yet fully come under control. The Russians are dug in tightly. Our soldiers are pressing, but the Russians are throwing in everything they can to hold on. Friends, I leave this situation without further comments. At the same time, while the Ukrainian forces are trying to push the Russians out of Novoekonomichne, the Russians have once again managed to enter Pokrovsk. This was also reported by Ukrainian soldiers. It was tough here today. The Russians managed to enter the city in small groups, trying to destabilize the situation from within. Our soldiers are holding the defense, working against Russian infiltrations. The city is under constant pressure, but no one is abandoning it. The fight is for every block. Geolocation data also confirms that the gray zone in the city is expanding again. So on the one hand, the situation is improving, but on the other hand is deteriorating. In short, the struggle continues. In the Dobropillia area, the Russians are not reducing the activity either. They are trying to storm Volodymyrivka, Nove Shachove, Nikonorivka, and fighting continues near Mayak and along the highway. Railway, sorry. So far, there have been no changes over the past day, but the fact that the Russians keep pressing shows they've pulled a lot of resources in this sector, and Ukrainian soldiers confirm this as well. Whether the entire Dobropillia direction can be cut off remains a big question. But the Ukrainian breakthrough near Novoekonomichne is most likely aimed precisely at worsening the situation for this Russian grouping. For now, we wait to see how events develop. Now let's move on to the situation in the Novopavlivka direction. Here, the Russians are pushing through in the area of Gorikhove, assaulting Dachne, Filia, Alexandrograd, and trying to break through near the villages of Tolstoy and Voskresenka. Over the past day, there have been no changes, but the intensity of attacks remains high in the Velyka Novosilka direction. Yesterday, the Russians once again managed to advance and capture two villages at once, Komushovacha and Zaporizhzhia. At the same time, they are already trying to push further with assaults ongoing across the fields. Unfortunately, the front here keeps moving not in our favor. In the Zaporizhzhia direction, the Russians managed to almost completely capture the village of Plavny. Their breakthrough here amounted to 2 kilometers 300 meters. This allowed them to improve their positions and move closer to Stepnohirsk as well as to the outskirts of the village of Primorsk, where they had entered just days ago and where Ukrainian forces took Russian soldiers captive. But as we can see, the activity here continues and the Russians are steadily trying to move forward. It looks like they plan to keep pushing along the Kakhovka reservoir and get as close as possible to Zaporizhzhia. Today, the distance to the city's outskirts is about 24 kilometers. But if the Russians reach the water barrier near Primorsk and the village of Rychne, then it will only be 12 kilometers to the outskirts of Zaporizhzhia, and drones could begin striking the city much more actively. That's why the situation here could seriously worsen. In the Kherson direction, the Russians are pushing through on the islands and are not reducing the activity, carrying out around 5 assaults per day. However, so far there are no major changes, and the Ukrainian forces are managing to repel all attacks. Now let's move to the Kostiantynivka direction. Here, the Russians are assaulting Pretechene, breaking through near Bila Hora, and attacking Klebanbyk. Ukrainian fighters report that the Russians are managing to push closer to the village, but active work is underway to destroy them, and they are not being allowed to gain a foothold. Still, the situation is difficult, and so far there have been no changes in the past day. In the Siversk direction, the Russians continue to push toward Yampil, while also assaulting Dronivka, Serebryanka, Pereizhne, and advancing in the area of Grigorivka. Over the past day, there have been no changes, but activity here remains high. The Russians are carrying out more than 10 assaults daily, and as we can see, they are gradually managing to improve their positions to move toward encircling Siversk. In the Lyman direction, the Russians are advancing in the area of the village of Kolodezi, while also attacking Shandrigolove and Karpivka. Here, the Russians are sparing no resources, conducting around 30 assaults per day, and they're trying to advance at any cost. However, for now, the Ukrainian forces continue to repel all attacks, and there have been no new changes over the past day. In the Borova direction, the Russians are pushing toward the village of Novoplatonivka, but so far they haven't achieved any success over the past day, and the attacks continue. In the Kupiansk direction, the advantage is on the side of the Ukrainian forces. The Russians were pushed back from the city, and the salient they intended to use to encircle Kupiansk was cut off. This has improved the situation here. However, the Ukrainian forces warn that the Russians have pulled in significant reserves and a major battle for the city may begin soon. At the same time, attacks on Petropavlivka continue, and the Russians are attempting to advance in the area of Stepova Novoselivka. For now, we are waiting to see how events develop further. In the Dvorichne direction, and the Russians are pushing toward Doroshivka, near Fogolivka, and Krasny Pershe. Over the past day, there have been no changes, but activity remains high. In the Kharkiv direction, assaults on the village of Gleboka continue, but so far all attacks have been repelled and the front line remains unchanged. In Vovchansk, the fighting also continues, but the situation here remains stable just as before. In the Sumy direction, small attacks continue near Oleksiivka, Vodolakhy, along the highway near Yablonivka and Yunakivka, but so far the Ukrainian forces are successfully repelling the Russians and they haven't been able to advance. At the same time, no new Ukrainian counterattacks have been reported, and the front line remains unchanged. Counterattacks have only been reported in the area of the village of Tetkina, where, according to the latest information, the Ukrainian forces have liberated Basalivka. No new fighting has been reported there so far. Meanwhile, information has emerged that Chinese ships have started entering the port of Sevastopol. According to our data, a Chinese container ship has made 4 entries since June, falsifying its automatic identification signal, reports Lloyd's List. This indicates that Russia is trying to restore regular container shipments from the temporarily occupied Sevastopol port, where trade was previously limited to agricultural products. It's noted that some containerized cargo appears to be industrial products from the temporarily occupied Donbass, indirectly suggesting the restoration of rail logistics in Russian-controlled areas of Ukraine. Friends, be sure to share your opinion about this in the comments. At the same time, reports show that large expenditures continue for ongoing reconstruction projects in Kyiv. The municipal enterprise Kyiv Budrekonstruktsiya, overseen by Kyiv Deputy Mayor Petro Panteleev, signed a new contract with LLC TFM East for additional reconstruction work on the station's large field dams. This same company had already won a tender in March for 563 million hryvnias. Now, without a tender, it was awarded another contract for raising the dam and constructing embankments around sludge field number 1. Interestingly, almost the entire sum is for soil. In the documents, it is priced at 372 hryvnias per ton, plus delivery at 974 hryvnias per ton. Whereas on the market, similar soil is offered at 20 to 90 hryvnias per ton. Friends, share your thoughts about this in the comments. Also today, even Igor Girkin Strelkov, who was sidelined by Putin for telling too much truth, expressed anger over Russia's lack of progress. It's a disgrace. Over the summer, we haven't broken through a single section of the front. In 16 months, we finished the assault on Chasiv Yar, while Ukraine allowed young people to travel abroad. If Ukraine were on its last breath, they would have started conscripting 16-year-olds, but everything is fine for them. Overall, dissatisfaction is growing, but the war continues. And that's all from me. So please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on all the latest news. Thank you for watching and see you next time. Bye bye.